Well, hello, my friends. This is Laurie Ann Smith. This is a Survivor Weekend check-in video. It's just a video I like to do on Saturdays, just to check in with people, and especially adult survivors of child abuse. So we just check how we're doing, see how we're feeling, just to be a bit of support for people. And and I know it's hard. It's so hard for survivors of abuse of any type. And so that's what we're doing. I'll just be probably talking a little bit about what I'm dealing with and going through. That's usually what I do because I'm just checking in, see how I'm doing, what I need to work on, what I have been working on, sort of thing. So, hopefully you'll feel some support here. If I can help you find resources, get a hold of me. And I volunteer with the ASC, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, a Morris Center program. I started a group again. I had one going, and my husband passed away 2.5 years ago, so I had to let it go so I could grieve and get through all that stuff. And I just recently started it back up again. And I have a SIA group going again. That's Survivors of Incest Anonymous. And I used to do that group as well, so I volunteer with them as well. And I volunteer with Advocates United for Humanity. That's my two best friends. We started that group a long time ago, and I wasn't able to keep going with them, but I'm back with those guys. So it's great. I love to be a resource for people. If I can help you find information or resources in your area or something, just get a hold of me, right? You can get a hold of me. Just look at my About section down below there. It'll say, it'll give my website, my email address, all that stuff is there. And you can contact me, if you need help with anything that I can possibly help you with. Because I know it's hard. It's so hard to, especially if you're just starting out on your healing journey, if you're a survivor of child abuse or abuse of any type, it's so hard because quite often, I'm a survivor of child abuse, and I suffered on my own for years and years and years. And to make that decision to reach out was very scary. And because, that's kind of part of that's admitting to yourself that the trauma that you went through is causing problems, right? So it's very, very hard on people, right? Hi, Melissa. I hope your day is going well so far. And mine is so far. I'm just having coffee. I did wake up a little bit later today, so I had pretty good sleep. Usually I'm up like 5 o'clock in the morning, long before my alarm's supposed to ring. Sleep is an issue for me. I've never slept well, and it doesn't matter what year I approach, I just never get a good sleep. It's hard. I can't even knock myself out, like with sleep aids, things like that. It just, it doesn't work for me. Sleep is a problem, but I did get some sleep last night, so that's good. But yeah, I'm just going to look at some stuff. Because this week I was doing the One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, the continuation, just talking about looking at the Survivor to Thriver workbook, because I'm just getting ready to myself start doing some more work on the CSA child sexual abuse, because I had to put that off because my husband, when he passed away, it was too much for me to try to deal with all of that grief and just the trauma of his loss and having to deal with the stuff I need to take care of and the grief work after that I knew I was going to have to do. I really had to put my healing journey off. I was like, that last segment of what I really wanted to work through, which is the CSA child sexual abuse, which is very difficult. And I couldn't do that at the same time. So recently, I feel strong enough now to go ahead and start it again. But it's a scary thought. I've already wrote books about it. I've talked about it for years, since 2009, really. And faced it, looked at it, wrote books about it. But to feel those feelings is tough. It really is. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get in touch with that inner, little girl that I was 8 to 9 years old. And I'm going to get in touch with those feelings again. And I'm going to work with myself to get through this stuff. So it's very difficult. And I'm able to do this on my own. Some people aren't. You need to be really careful when you're doing stuff like that. And, if you're just starting, like I said, if you're just starting out on your healing journey, it's a good idea to, always do that safety first check thing. Am I safe enough to be doing this? Is it going to cause me more grief and more trauma? And do I maybe need to reach out to a therapist or counselor so that I don't injure myself or injure somebody else, right? Or, just have a horrible, you know, time trying to deal with this stuff. I'm okay to do it on my own. So, but not everybody is, like I said, and there's no shame there's no shame in that, right? You just have to make sure you're safe enough. If you don't feel they are, then you need to get help, right? Not do it on your own. Even having another survivor buddy is a good idea. Somebody who can support you through it, right? That's what I have. I'm not really on my own, even though I'm doing the work on my own without a counselor or therapist. I have a good friend of mine is a psychotherapist. She's a retired psychotherapist, so she helps me get through a lot of stuff. And I also have some other good friends who are survivors, and I know that I can contact them at any time if I'm struggling or having a hard time. So I'm not really on my own. It's good to have that support network, and that's what that ASCA Survivor to Thriver Workbook is talking about. Have that support network around you, whatever your needs are for a support network. Whether it's just a group of friends that support you, maybe you've got somebody in your family who's supportive. That's not always the case, but it can happen that people have family members who are willing to help people get through things. Um, and or a counselor, somebody who is a trusted professional, right? So, whatever it is, that works for you, sort of thing. Hi, Wanda. Good morning. Yes, friends help us out. Well, they sure do. And especially when you find some good ones, you know. I've had friends that completely broke my heart, but I'm sure everybody's been through that at least once, if not more. And it's sad, right? But when you find friends who they have you in their best interest, and they're if they do something that's hurtful, they apologize. They want to keep that relationship going both ways. That's the kind of friend to have. Somebody who's going to be supportive, not take advantage of you because you are suffering or struggling, and not make you feel worse than you already do now. That's the thing, right? But I've got other friends too who are not survivors of abuse who are very helpful to me, which is really nice. Even though they know I've been through a lot, they don't quite know how to help me in that department, but at least they validate the abuse, they validate what I've been through, and you know, it's just they're there to support me if I need anything. So I think it's really great to have friends, and especially if you don't have any family. Like I don't have family that I can go to for help, so it has to be my friends. My friends are my family, so it is just important. But as I was looking at this stuff that I'm going to be dealing with, looking at the CSH sexual abuse, which I'm not really going to go into details here today, I'm just talking about what I'm going to be doing for my healing journey. I'm going to go back and revisit the wounding, the pain, and who I was at that time, because it's hard. I'm 55, it's like so many years later, even though those memories are there, they're intact. Like I said, the CSH sexual abuse memories are sort of fragmented. I've got bits and pieces, and it's just tragic. I think I did push a lot of it down because I didn't want to deal with it. Actually, I pushed it all down for quite some time. And then when I started looking at it, it's kind of like, who wants to look at that stuff? Who wants to remember those painful things? Like nobody. But until I face this stuff, and I'm not going to make progress in it, so that's why I'm doing it. But I feel strong enough now to get back on it. And I was just reading through because I knew that John Bradshaw's books. I know there's other good ones out there too, like Pete Walker. There's so many really good survivor books out there that it's great, right? If you have the money to get a hold of them, or if you can find them at your local library, um, you know, I know sometimes we don't have money for books, right? And I actually had a friend send me these books because at the time I didn't have money for these books when I was just starting my healing journey, and she was very helpful, and she sent me these books. And one is John Bradshaw, Homecoming, Reclaiming and Healing Your Inner Child, and then the other one is Healing the Shame That Binds You. So I've been through both of these books, and I was thinking about what I'm going to be working on for my healing journey, and I was thinking, of course, reparenting is a big part of that because I'm kind of doing that whole reparenting thing with all of my inner wounded selves, the parts of me that where the wounding happened at that age. That's the trauma. That's where the trauma is placed. So therefore, that's where I'm holding those really traumatic feelings from that age, right? So I'm going in and doing this inner child work and, you know, reparenting. They say reparenting. I don't really look at it like that. I kind of look at it as just getting in touch with myself and accepting myself for who I am, for who I was as a child, and doing that nurturing that I never got, that love and care and nurturing that my parents should have been responsible to do for me, which they didn't do. So I'm doing it myself now. So because my inner wounded selves, it's good for them to see that, hey, things are good on the outside. I'm an adult. I'm no longer being abused. Thank God. And I'm making some good progress. And I'm having a decent life, right? And that's kind of reassuring to my traumatic past that things are getting better. And I'm able to handle this stuff. See, so it's quite interesting how it works, really. But he has a section in here, actually a large part of this book of the homecoming book. This is reclaiming and healing your inner child. A lot of people have seen this book, and he's on page 117. Actually, it's a little bit before that. He's got the section called "Reclaiming Your Toddler Self," and then the next one is "Reclaiming Your Preschool Self," "Reclaiming Your School Age Self," "Reclaiming Your Adolescent." Right? Goes through and talks about all this stuff. And I wanted to look at that again because I had already originally done this work long time ago. And I have to go back in and redo it, see, with the CSA child sexual abuse. The reason why I did that is because I did all of this work separately from the CSA child sexual abuse. Because I knew I couldn't do it all together at the same time. I had to go through and do the work looking at the abuse from the physical abuse, the emotional, psychological abuse from my parents mainly first, because I knew that it was going to be too hard for me to do the child sexual abuse stuff with that. It's just too much to process, too much to go through, too many feelings to get in touch with. So I did all that other stuff first. Hi, Passaggio Olivello. Good evening. I hope your day's been good. So far, so good for the weekend. And I'm just talking about John Bradshaw's Homecoming, Reclaiming and Healing Your Inner Child, and looking at some stuff because I'm going to be going back in and doing the CSA child sexual abuse. But anybody can do this work for anything you've been through, right? And I used it originally for looking at mainly the physical abuse and the emotional, psychological abuse that I went through. And I knew at some point I was going to have to do the work on the CSA child sexual abuse. I did do a lot because I did this program called "Oh, you're working on the weekends too." Well, I used to work on the weekends too. I wish I'm actually looking for a job. I've been looking for a job since December 2019. But it's just insane the amount of people that are looking for work right now. This is such a hard time for people all around the world. And it's just unbelievable what people are going through. And that's kind of another reason why I wanted to do these shows, because just about last November, I started to feel better because I was really sick last year I had skin cancer and high blood pressure. It was just terrible. Like I was stroke level all year, and they couldn't figure out why. They were doing tests. We did all sorts of tests. Nothing was bringing it down. Finally, it did start to come down in December, but I did start to feel a little better starting last fall. So, I started realizing I need to reach out to people. There's so many hurting people out here, including myself, who are alone, don't have people to talk to, and not even anybody who seems to care about their situation. You know what I mean? It's like, it's tough, right? This is a really hard time for people. The people that are working out there, it's tough on you too, right? So the whole situation is hard all the way around the world. That's kind of why I do volunteer with different groups and stuff like that to try to reach out to people. And, it's good for me. It's not just that I just want to be so helpful. It's also good for me because I need that contact too with people, because I'm isolated, very isolated. I'm sitting right in the middle of a big old downtown core of a big city with people all around me, but they're doing their own thing. You know what I mean? Like people in this city I don't know. It's not that it's a bad city. It's a wonderful place, but I think people just do their own thing. No, there's not a whole lot of support here. Even the support groups that we have here, they charge a lot of money to go to them. That's why I don't go, because I'm not paying money to heal from something that somebody else did to me. No way. That's ridiculous that they should charge money for that. I don't think it's right, and I don't think it's okay. Um, so I go with free support groups. That's what I go through because I think it just makes more sense, right? Helping people overcome abuse and charging money for it. To me, that's just garbage. But oh well. Yeah, still in total lockdown. Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's just hard on everybody. All of this stuff, right? So, and then now we've got the vaccines, but who knows how well they'll work with all the variants and stuff. So people, it's a hard situation everywhere, right? For everybody, it's tough. But he does. I wanted to just look at this because it's got a really interesting section on some affirmations that you can do for yourself. Because this is kind of like Survivor Weekend check-in, sort of a healing thing, and what we can do for ourselves, you know what I mean, to make ourselves feel better. And it's this toddler meditation. He's got meditations for all of them, but he's also got these affirmations for all of them too. And I think, so I'm going to be going through looking at my school age period of when I was a school age child, because the CSA child sexual abuse took place. I actually did all the original work in here for all of it, but now I'm going back to do the CSA child sexual abuse. So that was when I was 8 years old, 8 to 9. So I'm going to just look at the reclaiming your school age stuff. That's what I'm going to concentrate on because I've already kind of done the other stuff. And he's got all kinds of like his questionnaire. There's what questions that you can answer in here. Index of suspicion. It's kind of just to see sort of check. It's a way for you to check to see just how wounded you really were. You know what I mean, as a child, and gives an idea of what normal school age situation should look like. Concrete logical thinking, all sorts of stuff. These are really great books. And there's this, I just want to look at for us today, affirmations. So for instance, I'm going to go in and talk to my little 8-year-old self, who was sexually abused. I've actually done lots of work with her, but the thing is she's, I've done inner work with that. I was just talking about that. My Envisioned Mind. That was a program that I used. I talked about it quite a bit because it was really helpful for me. It does cost money, that one. It's not a free program. My friend did it for me for free because she helped create the program with another friend of hers, Beverly Searle, out of Australia. And so I don't know what they charge for it. It's not free because it's a program that they actually work with you. It's like going to a therapist, basically, right? And so I don't know what it is though. It didn't used to be all that expensive, but they did it for me because they were my friends, right? So this is why they did it for me, which is really nice of them to do. And they also knew I didn't have a lot of money to work with, so they were like, we'll just do it for you. That's fine. That was really cool. So I was like, I got to do this program, My Envisioned Mind. It's a meditation. I talked about it on one of my shows just not too long ago, and I created a safe place for myself. Basically, it's you can create whatever safe place you want for yourself. I created an island out in the middle of the ocean where nobody could find it. Only I know where it is. It's basically invisible to anybody else. Like nobody would find it. That's my safe place, and all of my inner wounded selves are there. Right? And they call this inner child work. There's many different ways you can do it. He even has suggestions in here for inner child work. Right? It's a little different than her program, but I really liked her program because it just made total sense to me. And what I did was I went around and saved myself from all of these places of wounding because the trauma they do have found that trauma is stored in the limbic system up in the front of your brain here. There's this limbic system, and that's where if a child or anybody survives a really traumatic event, that will be stored as pictures in the limbic system. So you can talk about it all you want. I mean, I could talk about it for years and not make very much progress because in my healing from it, because it's stored in the brain as pictures. So I had to go in and do this meditation and save myself from all these places where I was wounded. And in doing that, that's that mental visual picture of me going and getting myself out from that situation. And that was wonderful, actually, because I wasn't saved as a child and nobody came to help me. And, I just was left there to, deal. So it's kind of like a young kid, this children, it's too traumatic for children, this stuff, right? So then we as adults If we don't get in touch with that stuff, we're quite often carrying the wounding because of that, right? So I went and picked myself up from all these places of wounding where I was, got myself to my island where they are now, and which is really just inside me, right? The issue is it allowed me to feel safe. Very, very cool. And for the first time, to allow my inner, you know, 2 year old, 3 year old, all the way up through my teens even. I even had one who's like a young 20s in there. And just to feel safe, right? Wonderful feeling. And they're not now, those inner wounded parts of myself aren't stuck where they were when the abuse took place, right? That's exactly where they were. For how many years? 55. I'm 55. So if the wounding took place at 10-year-old, that's 45 years. I started this work, let's say, I did that meditation actually back in 2013, many years ago. So at 2013, I was in my 40s, right? So let's say 30 something years of myself, that inner wounded child that I was being abused, 30 something years later to finally get them to safety, they were still laying where they were when they were being abused, you know, and that's horrific, right? So that's why those memories would come, all of those traumatic visions, or not visions, but pictures, traumatic pictures that I remembered from being wounded as a child, right? And then, they would never go away. They would just come, obtrusive memories, right? That's kind of like flashbacks, same idea. And so by getting myself to safety, that took that away. I no longer have that stuff going on. I have a little bit with the CSHL sexual abuse because that's what I'm saying. I haven't fully really done the work because when I go and I envision, this is what it's called my envisioned mind, right? I see myself at these ages. But my 8-year-old who was sexually abused, who was me at 8 years old, is running around in a ballerina dress, having a good time. See, she's not she's not remembering the abuse. The 10-year-old is my 10-year-old who was physically abused horrifically by my mother, is really upset because she's holding the pain. She's holding the she remembers and she's holding the pain, she's holding the anger and the whole trauma from that CSHL sexual abuse that I went through. So the 8-year-old doesn't is having a good time. The 10-year-old can't figure out why. That's why I know I need to go in and do some work. Because in other words, that's me telling myself that I need to remember that stuff. Because I'm still holding the pain. See what I mean? That's if you want to look at it that way. It's really interesting how this stuff works. But it's a great program. Like I said, it's out of Australia. It's called My Envisioned Mind. I did actually a show talking about it, and I put the links in there. But it's a great program. Yeah, I tried to see what they charge for it on the website, but I couldn't see where it was, like the pricing, like how they cost it out. So I think they said, contact them even if you can't afford it, and see if they'll work with you. Like she's a nice lady, that Beverly. So her friend Kate Mitchell is my friend, and that's the one who helped her to set that program up in the very beginning when they were working on it. Because it's not just for survivors of abuse. It's good for anybody who's suffered any kind of trauma, and also it's not even necessary for trauma. A lot of people who use it to help with their learning disabilities and all sorts of things. So it works for a lot of different things. It's not just for people like, survivors of abuse. It actually is a great program for a lot of different stuff. It's really interesting. And so a school age meditation, I was thinking, because I'm going to be looking at some pretty harsh stuff here, from CSHL sexual abuse, right? And I thought, I'll look at his stuff because he's got some good affirmations. So we could go in and do some inner child work, even if you haven't set up a safe place. You can even just tell yourself it's not your fault. You didn't deserve to be treated that way, no matter what the abuse was. And none of us deserve that. No child deserves to be abused, right? And you can just, like support yourself. So I actually have these books online as well. And I'll just scroll down here. Just give me 2 seconds. So the school age one, we can sort of go through and do these affirmations with our inner child. If you haven't ever done inner child work, there's lots of information on it on the web for free. You don't have to buy these books to get this information. Just look up inner child work, adult survivors of child abuse, inner child work, things like that. And that will bring up all kinds of stuff on it. There is a lot of material out there. Okay, let me see. Let me see what page that's at. But anyway, these are just affirmations we can do. So, because I'm going to be looking at this stuff, it's going to be very triggering and very upsetting for me to look at this CSA child sexual abuse. So I'm going to set myself up with affirmations and stuff like that, so that you know, I'll feel better, right? And my inner child will feel better, right? Because once that 8-year-old actually does start to remember, I think I'm going to be able to make some huge progress in my healing journey, right? So in order to get her to do that, I'm going to have to go in and actually work with her. That's my inner self, right? So it's tough. These things are really, really hard. Most people would want to do this with a therapist or, somebody like that. I'm okay to do it myself on my own. Like, I'm not going to hurt myself or hurt somebody else because I'm doing this work. But you need to be really sure before you start doing something like this, that it's not going to trigger you and then send you backward in your healing journey, and cause you don't want to hurt yourself or hurt anybody else. You just don't. So I'm just looking for that page here online. Here it is, school age. So the affirmations that we can say. And I think this is really good for people who were abused as children anyway, because that's what this is not about. CSA child sexual abuse. This is about abuse of any type, and these are ways that we can do some sort of self inner soothing. Right? For instance, I could talk to myself and I could say, "Little Laurie, you can be who you are at school. You can stand up for yourself, and I'll support you. It's okay to learn to do things your own way. It's okay to think about things and try them out before you make them your own. You can trust your own judgments. You need only take the consequences of your choices. And you can do things your own way, and it's okay to disagree. I love you just the way you are, little Laurie." I could be talking to myself, see. And you can trust your feelings. If you're afraid, tell me. It's okay to be afraid. We can talk about it. You can choose your own friends. You can dress the way the other kids dress, or you can dress your own way. You deserve to have the things you want, and I'm willing to be with you no matter what. I love you, little Laurie. So this is what we could tell ourselves. He said, there's also the meditation part. So this is how we would get in touch with those inner parts of ourselves, those inner wounded children. And this is always what's a little bit tricky, because for people who are going back looking at who they were as children, for myself, I'll just use myself for an example. And I'll just use the 10-year-old because my memories are so intact for when I was 10. And I just really remember how I felt at school. I remember how I felt in the home. I remember how I felt with my neighbors and my friends, my little school-age friends that I was hanging out with. I remember how I felt about myself, my body, all of that stuff. And it's really tough to go back and look at that stuff. You know what I mean? And that's where you have to be really careful. But if you're having a hard time to getting in touch with who you were at the age of your wounding, whenever that was, and who you were at that time as that little child, as that little person, he has these meditations that you can do for yourself to help you sort of get in touch with that part of yourself. For instance, what was it like in your house when you first went to school? Because not everybody was abused in their home. I mean, the abuse takes place wherever the child is. We already know this. So, for me, it was a family within my family, but not for everybody. So you can still do this meditation, and for whatever age you were, and go back and actually get in touch with yourself, and then do that affirmation and tell yourself, you didn't deserve that. You deserve so much better. And that we can learn to love that wounded part of ourselves, because it wasn't our fault. It wasn't my 10-year-old's fault. It's easy for me to say as an adult it wasn't my fault. But that little 10-year-old needs to know that she was abused and it wasn't her fault. And She didn't do anything wrong, right? There was nothing that she did to cause that. So this is how we can kind of get in touch with this sort of stuff. Is like, do you remember your very first day at school? Do you remember your first day in any of the different grades? Some people do have memories going way back. Some people don't. Some people will have pushed their memories out so far because of the abuse that they can't remember anything about their childhood. I know my sister's like that. Says, did you have a lunchbox, a book satchel, a book bag? How did you get to school? Were you afraid to go to school? Were there any bullies who scared you? This kind of stuff. It really helps you get in touch with who you were at that school age, like especially young, like elementary school, primary school stuff. Who was your favorite teacher? Um, you can imagine school playground, right? And imagine see your school age self on the playground. Um, what are you doing on the playground? What are you wearing? And you can walk up to that to and imagine that you could become him. And now you're a young school child looking up at the grown-up you, and you see yourself as a wise and gentle. He has wizard here, but you could say anything. A wise and gentle person. Hear your grown-up voice. Hear your grown-up voice saying warm and loving things to you. And if alone, you can record the affirmations for the wounded inner school age child. Um, with a partner, say the affirmations to your partner. With a group, you can do this with a group as well. And it's just a good way to get in touch with ourselves and tell ourselves that we're not going to leave ourselves. Because so many people who were abused as children have that abandonment. It's because child abuse really is a form of abandonment. There's emotional abandonment, all sorts of stuff going on when a child's been abused. And so it's just so hard. I needed my little inner wounded self needs to know that I love her. All these different parts of myself that were wounded. That I love them, I care about them. I'm not going to leave them. And it's okay for them to feel the feelings that they feel because they were hurt, they were wounded. You know, it's just important to get in touch with that part of herself. And actually, um, I don't honor the abuse. I just honor my inner child for actually um, for what she went through. You know what I mean? And still tried to be such a trooper. You know, and if you were abused as a child, you can do the very same, right? Very same, because we didn't deserve that, and you didn't, I didn't, and we need to. That's how that whole learning how to love ourselves. It sounds real easy, but we have to go back in and learn how to love our wounded self, right? Because that's the part that needs love, right? We might be getting some love from out, in our adult life, which hopefully, right? Hopefully that's the case. Somebody in our life loves us, cares about us, right? And yeah, Laura Pinder, she's got a good question. Is child abuse misdirected anger mad at something else, but takes it out on the child? Well, I've done quite a lot of study on child abuse, but some people would say, well, you're an expert because you've survived it and all this stuff. And I'm like, no, I don't know. I don't know if there's anybody who's a true expert on this stuff. The issue is there's been enough information out there, and generally it's used to control. So it can be in that misdirected anger, if a parent or caregiver or teacher, whoever abuses a child, it's normally to control the situation because that's what they found out about abuse of any kind, like domestic violence, any type of abuse, whether it's a man or a woman, because women abuse men too. Believe it or not, my sister abused her husband, my oldest sister. It's not always it's not always the man doing the abusing, and it's quite often used to control. It's to get the upper hand on the situation. And also, if a parent or a caregiver is just negates the needs of the child, then it's just easier for them to abuse that child. So sometimes it's like, I don't know, my parent, in my case, both my parents, I could say it was misdirected anger. They were mad at something else. They were mad at each other because my parents were always fighting in domestic violence situations. And then it would escalate down to us because my mom's nerves would be shot from dealing with my dad. Same with my dad dealing with my mom. And any little thing that you did that just made them angry, set them off into a rage, either one. Not usually, not at the same time, but that can happen, right? But in my case, it was one at a time. It was either my dad or my mom, and they would then take their frustration out on me, so and on my siblings, right? So it's normally a means to control a situation. If children are doing something that the caregiver doesn't like, then the caregiver uses abuse to control that child, whether it's emotional, psychological, uh, you know, spiritual abuse, right? Verbal abuse, physical abuse, sometimes even child sexual abuse. It does happen. It's terrible what people do to children, and it's not, it's just like, it's so mind-boggling to me how somebody could do that to a child. And in my adult years, I've seen a few things that I just, people treat their kids so terribly. Just shake your head, you know. It's like, why would you do something like that to your child? It's like there's you. So in other words, that child's life, they don't value it, because if you value something, you're going to take care of it. You know what I mean? So if you value your children, even if they're acting up and they're acting really, especially as a teenager, acting terrible, if you value them and you love them, you're going to find other ways to work with them instead of abusing them, right? Because you're not going to want to hurt them, right? That's the whole thing. People that don't value their children don't mind hurting their children, and because they don't really have a relationship with that child. They don't care. That's how easy it is for them to kill their children, because they have no relationship with that child. They don't want the child. They don't love it. So it's no problem for them to kill them. People always say, I just don't know how somebody could kill a child like that. It's very easy. Just don't care. And they don't. And they don't even care about the repercussions, knowing that, even if they dump the body and they're found later, because I'm always watching the headlines because of what I do with child abuse prevention and stuff. And it's like, they don't care. They just try to hide the bodies. And they know that eventually they could be busted, but they really don't care. And then they go to the court and they claim, insanity, or whatever, and they get off, or they just get a few years somewhere. Um, it's it's just sick and twisted is what it is, and none of us should have to go through this stuff. Um, and it's not, abuse isn't like when a parent just has a bad day. That's not abuse. A parent can have a bad day. Caregiver, teacher can have a bad day. You know what I mean? Say something mean to the child, or you know, enforce a rule that's just a bit too much. You know, taking privileges away that, over something, shouldn't have been such a big deal. Everybody can have a bad day. Parents are allowed to have a bad day. We're not talking about that. I'm not talking about that. That's why that people have quite often confused discipline with abuse, right? And they confuse a parent having a bad day, just, that they're just so abusive. Abuse is a consistent thing that a parent, caregiver, whoever the abuser is, will do to control a situation. And that's how they're going to treat that child. That's how they're going to treat their children, or those children. It's to get their needs met, usually. The need for control. In CSA child sexual abuse, it's the need for sexual gratification, whatever that is. It's a means of controlling the situation. So it's terrible. Yeah. But I think some of it is misdirected anger, I think, just mad at the world, maybe things aren't going well for that adult, that too many crises. That was a lot of my parents' problem. They just had way too many crises all the time, and no ability to cope. Doesn't mean that you abuse your children. There's no excuse for that. It's just like, definitely not. Yeah, that's right. Love doesn't give you bruises. That's exactly right. And the issue is some people say, well, tough love, because that was their attitude. It's like, we're going to beat our children in shape here. But well, all they were doing was using us for punching bags, to get their aggression out. Right? So that's not okay. And the thing is that's not love. So yeah, love shouldn't hurt, in other words, right? And like I say, I'm always making, sort of people aware that love is like abuse is not discipline, and discipline's not abuse. Because I got normal discipline, right? And I understood the difference between the two. Abuse is abuse, discipline's discipline. Right? And children, they do need direction. They do need guidance. You can't just let them do whatever they want. Turn them into they turn into horrible adults with a whole set of baggage because of that. There's consequences to behavior. But the thing is there's really good, proper parenting stuff that people can do that doesn't damage the child and actually helps them to grow up really loving that parent, and that parent really loves that child. I didn't get any of that, see? So I'm completely lacking in all of that stuff. And I think that's what happened to my parents, because I don't think my parents got any of that either. They had no clue how to do parenting. They were wounded themselves, and not everyone who abuses a child will then, or not everybody who is abused as a child will go on to abuse children. That's very true, because like I said, two of my siblings went on to break the cycle, right? But it can happen, right? And like I said, it is cyclical a lot of times, right? A real problem. So unless people are willing to say, I don't want to put my child through what I've been through, no way, you know, and really make the effort to care for that child properly and love that child, they're just going to repeat the cycle. It's not good. Parenting skills should be taught in high school. Well, and this, I don't know, this whole parenting thing, it's such an issue because it's not just young people that abuse children, it's older people too. My parents started abusing their children when they were in their 20s. And then they kept right on until they were in their 50s. So my parents abused their children for like 30 years. It's unbelievable, right? But it does older people can abuse too. And I'm not sure what we're going to, as a society, I think what it is, we have to wake people up to the fact that um, abuse is wrong. So there's a lot of people out there that think there's nothing wrong with it. And that's why we see the kids ending up in the headlines in body bags or in the hospitals, because they think it's fine to do that stuff to the children, right? And it's kind of like, where would you get that information? I really don't know. How could you possibly think that? I don't know. Anybody in their right mind would know that's not okay. But the thing is we're dealing with people that don't care, and you can't force people to care, right? That's the problem. It's a societal issue. It's a really sick problem that we've got on our hands. It's not going to change until people start caring about children. And people have never cared about children, and this is the issue. Because if you do the studies, child abuse studies of when child rights actually came around, and they were starting to make it illegal to actually kill children, right? Because before that, you could just kill children, no big deal, right? Just bury them in the backyard, throw them in the pit, whatever. But then all of a sudden, back in like around the late 1800s, early 1900s, they started to promote protection of child rights, right? That actually children do have the right to life, and that they do have the right to live an abuse-free life, right? And my parents, they were brought up. My like for instance, my mom was born in 1927. My dad was born in 1923. Their parents were born in late 1800s, and their parents were born in the mid 1800s. So it's about 30 years in between for each generation. So it's really not a whole lot of information, like modernization coming along in a period of 100, 200 years. So my parents' ideas were really backwards, and their parents' ideas were really backwards. Like back in those days, people just used to beat on children. That's what they did. Seriously, back to like 1800s, that's what they did. They just loved to beat on children. It was just the thing to do. Children were supposed to be silent. They were not supposed to be heard. They were supposed to be seen and not heard, in other words. They had no voice. They couldn't ever say anything to anybody. And nowadays things have changed, right? But the thing is there's never been a situation where child abuse was ever not a problem. It's always been a problem, and it always will be until people start caring about children and realizing that they need protection, not abuse, right? I mean, they need protected from abuse. So we've got to get society to change the way they feel about children. Do they value children? If they do, then they need to protect them, right? And it's just, and I'm not just talking about parents. I mean, I'm talking about the whole entire thing needs to change, right? Because it's not always a parent that will abuse a child. As we know, there's a whole lot of other people that get a hold of children and abuse them too, right? Sexual abuse and all sorts of things, child sex trafficking and stuff. There's a lot of people out there that love to profit off of and use children, right? And they've always done that. It's been going on for many thousands and thousands of years. It's not okay. And I just happen to be one of those people that's willing to say it's not okay. It's really not, right? How are we going to change it? I think there's no real answer until people start caring about children, right? It's really sad because I see these headlines out here and it breaks my heart, man, because I'm just like, what are these people thinking? People killing children. My grandmother actually was responsible for one of her son's deaths. My mom's mom. See, my mom's mom was a highly abusive woman and beat up one of her sons. He was just like a young teen, 14 years old. And she beat him up and then made him sleep in the barn and he died because he got pneumonia. But he was really sick from the beating. And she didn't do any time. This was probably back in like the mid 1930s. And, she didn't do any time. You know, they lived in a rural area in Nova Scotia. Um, they just said, "Oh, he died. Whatever, just bury him out in the backyard." Because my grandmother was abusing all of her children, including my mother. So these ideas that people have about how to raise children they need to change the way they feel about children. It's not okay to abuse a child. It's just not. But a lot of people think that it is. They think, well, we should just be. My mom used to say stuff like that to me. She'd be like, I could kill you. It's my right. And she's beating on me. I'd be laying on the ground just going, well, when I was really little, I'd be like, don't kill me. Then when I got older, I'm like, yeah, go ahead and kill me. Like, whatever. You know what I mean? Because I just developed a really bad attitude. And I'm like, if you want to kill me, just go for it. You know what I mean? You already killed me anyway. I was like, then she'd really beat me up because she'd be mad because I said something. So the issue is, it's kind of like, this is not okay for parents to think that they have the right to kill their children, but they do. They think they have the right, but they don't, because children have the right to life. That's a worldwide right. Children have the right to life. They really do. It's not okay for a parent to kill a child. In many cultures, actually around the world now, I mean, even though the laws would say that the child has the right to life and that a parent or caregiver, any adult can't come along and kill a child and just think that's okay. The government will say, okay, child has rights, but the people don't uphold it, so they still kill their children. No problem. Just bury them out in the backyard, whatever. So I'm sick and tired of it, and I'm like, look, something's got to happen. There's a lot of people out here fighting against this, and there always will be, people that will stand up and say this is not okay. I don't have time to get involved. I'm 55. By the time I got a degree and was able to make any difference in this whole mess, besides just volunteering with not-for-profits, I just don't have the time, the energy or the money to do something like that, unfortunately, because I would be otherwise. I probably would have gone into law, and I just don't have the time or the energy or the money to do it. So, and not the brains either, really. There's got to be smart people out there that actually care about children. I know there are, and just take a look at the headlines. There's plenty of good people out there changing the laws and getting this stuff changed, but it's just so slow. In the meantime, we have children just being abused, and most of it's for CSA child sexual abuse, because they won't really work on the physical abuse stuff and the emotional and verbal, psychological abuse stuff. It's all kind of almost geared all of it to CSA child sexual abuse, which I'm glad they're doing something about it. Thank God. They're working on it to change it. But the thing is, it's such a problem. What, like physical abuse isn't a big deal? Physical abuse almost killed me. You know what I'm saying? Child sexual abuse is physical abuse. But not only that, the abuse that my parents dished out, my mom and my dad, which wasn't sexual abuse, it was physical abuse, could have killed me, right? It's not okay. Bash your kid's head into the wall. You can give him a concussion like several times. You know what I mean? Like, that's not all right. So this is what I'm saying. I just happened to survive, and wasn't crippled by it to the point where I couldn't speak anymore. Like some of these poor kids out here, shaken baby syndrome, stuff like that. They end up in wheelchairs with feeding tubes, and nobody cares, right? Well, there's a whole bunch of us out here that do care, right? And that's why I come on as an adult survivor and just say, look, if you're in a survivor of abuse, you did not deserve that, because there's a whole world of people out there that would say different, or just not, or just the thing that's really hurtful is the indifference. Turning the shoulder. I don't care. I don't see you. I don't see what you've been through. I don't see your pain. I don't see what your problem is. You know what I mean? Just totally disvalidating and unvalidating our our experience that we should have, that we deserved so much better, right? So that's why I'm always encouraging people. If you haven't started a healing journey, and you're struggling and you just don't know what you're going to do, there are tons of resources out there, but you have to look around, see what works for you, you know, because not everything works for everybody, right? So find what works for you, and then hold your head up high. You know, you did not deserve that, and I did not deserve that, and I don't need to go around in life, you know, still with the attitude that, oh, I'm just a worthless kid and just a loser. I didn't matter anyway, and that's not cool, right? Learning to let go has saved my life. Laura Pinder says, yeah, well, there is that aspect to it. A lot of people, I even have people making comments on my stuff here and there. Well, they'll say, oh, you're just keeping it around, you're harboring it. I'm actually working through stuff, and I'm also interested in being a bit of support for people, right? um, but some people will just let it go completely, and that's totally cool. It's kind of whatever you need. For me, I needed to work through it because both my parents were my abusers. I didn't have any normal modeling, and I didn't have any normal um, modeling on how to be an adult, and I didn't have any normal thought processes on anything. So I really needed to work through this stuff to see what I was doing, why I was self-sabotaging, even that I was self-sabotaging. What is it? You know what I mean? What am I doing? Why am I having such a horrible life here? Why do I keep doing these sort of things? I had to get in touch with all that stuff. In order to do that, it took me a lot of time and a lot of work. And so I couldn't just let it go, because I would have just continued going in the direction I was going, which was down, down, downhill, let me tell you. So some people can just let it go and just be at peace. And that's totally cool. Like I said, it's sort of whatever you need, right? For me, I couldn't just let it go. I really had to do a lot of work on it. And I have let the hatred go, because that was killing me. And I've directed it now to proper anger, which is being angry at people who abuse children and stuff like that. That's proper anger. But I no longer inwardly, the anger is not directed towards me anymore. So I'm not sad. I'm not trying to kill myself anymore. Like I said, I still kind of think about it now and then, especially when I'm down, sad. But I've actually stopped the ideation where I'm actually thinking about attempting it. Right? Lots of great things have happened for me over the last so many years, but it has taken me a long time. And it takes as long as it takes. Some people will say, you know, just get over it, right? It's like, well, if you could just get over it, you probably would. So that's what I'm saying. You need to do what's best for you as a survivor, and only you would know what that is. That's the truth, right? Somebody else can't tell you exactly what you need to do, because they're not in your shoes. They haven't walked in your shoes. They're not in you. They don't know what only you would really know what you need, you know. And so it's just important to whatever you're doing, to just take good care of yourself. And so those are just things that we can do. I like this section of this book, this John Bradshaw's book, just doing those self affirmations to talk to my inner wounded self, to say, you know, I love you, that wounded child that I was. And I think that's just so important. That's just how I really work through a lot of the self-hatred, self-loathing stuff. So I've already done a lot of that work, but I'm going to go back and redo some more with my that part of me from the CSHL sexual abuse that I still want to work on. And it's just good to do whatever works for you. But that's just where I'm at right now. And I wanted to read my poem. I talked about it not too long ago. And it's called My Victory. And it's on my website. You can check it out if you want to. Actually, I don't know. My website's on my About section, actually. Or it's actually in the front. Like, you can find it. It's on my stuff. It's in my poems. It's called My Victory. And this was a poem that I wrote to my abusers. And it says, you chose your weapons, leaving me no shield, no protection, no safety, a prisoner in your lair. It was your fancy and your delight to watch me cower and tremble, not able to fight. You waged war and brutality against me, a small child, bruised, battered, bloodied. You chanted your victory shout, believing you had won the battle. Over time you fell. Death, insanity, madness overtook you, and your frame returned to dust. A small wounded child grew amongst the thorns. She learned along the path from teachers wise and true. They taught her to learn to love herself, taught her to love others. They planted a spark of light within that grew as time moved on. Today, that small girl is grown and stands tall. She faced her demons, faced her death, and learned to love and live. So that's my victory. And that's what I want for you, my friends. You know, whatever you came through, whatever they put you through, whoever these people were, you did not deserve that. You should have a victory poem too. You should write yourself a victory poem and, be proud of it and wear it as a shield, because if you've come through abuse, you've come through stuff that which is just, you know, the world has no idea. The world has no idea how hard it is, right? So, I wish that victory for you, that you would learn to stand tall and that you would learn to stand proud, you know, and learn to love yourself, which then in turn allows you to love others and, have a good life, right? We so we so deserve that. I am deserving of that. And so that poem I wrote for my abusers, and when I wrote it, I could just picture myself as this little child, and then I pictured myself growing up, and standing tall. I remembered all the people that helped me out along the way. I did have help throughout my years from people who were very kind to me, even though my own family wasn't. My parents weren't, but I had other friends of mine's parents be really kind to me, and I remembered those people, and I thought I listened to teachers wise and true. And I went back. I remembered all those people, and they're still in my life today. They're elderly. They're in their 80s now, but they're still alive. And I keep in touch with them. They're my Facebook friends, and their family. I just love them because they were more of a family to me than my own family, and they helped me to keep. They helped to plant that seed of love in my heart. Right? So I'll never forget that. So that was kind of a tribute to them as well. And whatever it is, just take really good care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. And if you're struggling, like I always say on all my shows, you got to reach out and get some help. If you think you can't do it, you need to call a crisis line, right? Because there's no shame in that. I wish my brothers would have called a crisis line. They'd still be here today. My brothers were horrifically abused by my dad, mainly. A little bit obviously by my mom too. My mom was beaten on them and stuff. But mainly my dad's stuff was the stuff that was so horrible that I remember when I was really little. My dad would like stomp on them, literally stomp on them, like kick them and stomp on them, and just hurt them so incredibly bad. And the psychological abuse and stuff that was going on all the time anyway. But they were just so wounded and they just couldn't do it, and they took their lives. And I was heading the same way. That's what I'm saying. We don't deserve that. We don't deserve that. Make a phone call, stick it out, get some help, right? Whatever it is, right? Get some help. Don't allow yourself to be destroyed by what somebody else did to you. That's not fair and that's not right. And that's why I say I want that victory. I want that victory for you too. Because this is my victory. Every day I wake up, it's a slap in my abusers' faces. Absolutely. And it makes me happy to think about that too when I wake up. That's not the first thing I think about when I wake up. But usually at some point during the day, I'm like, yeah, they couldn't kill me, and they couldn't get me to kill myself either. You know what I mean? So I want that for you. I really do. If you're struggling, like I said, make a phone call. If you don't like the person on the phone, hang up, call somebody else, because you may get somebody, else who you really like, right? Who's going to help you out, right? So whatever you do, be kind to yourself, love yourself. Have a good weekend, everybody. Thanks for being here with me, Laura. I had Wanda here, and Laura, and I've had Melissa here. And others, thank you so much, and Passaggio Olivello. And I wish you a good night there, over where you're at. And everybody else, I wish you a good day. Take care of yourselves. I'll be back on tomorrow night with one of my shows that I like to do, Living in the Light of Eternity. And then Monday, I'll be back on One Child Abuse Survivor, the continuation. Monday through Friday, we'll pick up there again. So take good care of yourselves. And like I said, if I can help you find resources or anything, or you want to be my Facebook friend or whatever, just get a hold of me on my About section there. And if I can help you, I will. And have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon.